After installing Visio, find a location, right-click, New, Microsoft Office Visio Drawing. Give it a name, and then open the file. Visio will ask you what kind of chart or diagram you would like to make. And there are different ones available which not only look different but serve completely different purposes. And if you study project management, quality control, or how to do fun stuff like statistics, then you will learn what more and more of these charts are useful for. Most people just use Visio to make what's called a flow chart. Sometimes for charting out a process, in which case then it becomes called a process flow chart. And when you are making process flow charts, it is important to consider which person or what perspective the process flow chart is covering. For example, a process flow chart for how a system works, like say a website, might be very different from a process flow chart for a user who's using the same website, using the same system. And of course, you might develop process flow charts for both, from both perspectives, because that allows for easy comparison. And the real benefit of process flow charts is first in designing a process, and then of course after you've designed it, then you want to show it to someone else so that they can approve it. And so it's both useful for designing as well as useful for review and discussion. And of course, after you've made your charts, hold on to them. Do not delete them, because later on there will be times when the site, or maybe it's a machine you're working with, needs to be redesigned. And looking at the old charts and then just modifying them with whatever updates is necessary can save you a lot of time. Since this is a flow chart, it is going to show a sequence of events that flow or go from one end of the chart over to the other end of the chart. And of course, everything has a beginning and an end. When making process flow charts, it's very important that you define absolutely everything. Don't leave anything undefined, meaning, for example, don't have a process that doesn't eventually go to the end at some point. And note, it is possible to have more than one end point, but generally you only want to have one beginning, and it keeps things simple if there's very few ends available. To start off with, we have several basic shapes. Myself and a lot of people that do these charts like to use little circles for the beginning and the end. And the circle is over here under on-page reference. So there's our circle on page reference. And I've already went over here, and you just click and drag, and then there you are, you have your symbol. And of course, as you're working with your symbols, you might make little changes to them. And after doing so, then if you need to make the same symbol again, it might take time to keep formatting all those changes, right? So just pick one that you've already formatted, go Control-C, Control-V as in Victor, and now you've pasted that over. And so that copies it perfectly. And if you ever have difficulty selecting something that's already there, just use the lasso tool, just click and drag, and then you can select one or more objects. However many objects that you need to select. And then of course, if you need to move things and you want to move them very precisely instead of just clicking and dragging like this, hold down Shift and then use the arrow keys. Very handy. The next basic shape that we will be working with is the shape for a process. And a process is just anything that happens. And so we go over here and just drag that over. We have our process shape. And finally, we're going to be working with the decision shape, which is this right here. And you'll notice that I'm taking little pictures of these things and just putting them over here. That's just for reference, either for myself or you could do that for yourself as well. This is just intended to benefit you since you're watching my video, and you might want to remember what these are. So there they are as pictures. Okay, also we need to label everything, and the way to label something in Visio is to double click. After double clicking, we see a cursor and we can type. So this will be start, this will be end. Here's our decision. We'll just call that decision. And everything should start with a process. So every chart starts with a little circle and then goes straight to our process. We'll call this process 1, process 2. And you'll want to look at this video in full screen mode so that you can actually read what I'm typing. And to help you out a little bit, I am going to scroll, or I'm going to zoom in. And to zoom in, just hold down Control and use your mouse wheel. At this point, I need to begin making some connections so that the process flow can be visualized. And to do that, I'm going to go over to the connector tool over here. And after I've clicked on that, I can now highlight any process I want. And you'll notice that there's these little anchor points. And I'll just go from one anchor point over to the next. And now, if I want to move a process, then I'll go back to Pointer tool, click on the picture of a pointer, and I can move my process. And you'll notice that the arrow follows because it's been anchored. That's useful. One thing that I like to use is the dynamic connector. And so to use that, I'm going to select it and just bring it over. And the dynamic connector does essentially the same thing. It updates dynamically. You'll find as you begin to use Visio that there's a lot of different connector types available, not just what I'm showing in this video. For example, the line curve connector. Let's take a quick look at that. I can drag that over, and as you can see, this has a bit of a curve to it, and I can control that by clicking on this yellow anchor point and just moving that anywhere I want. And it's even possible to add additional anchor points, so that if I want, I can turn this into an S curve. In Visio, there's a lot of things to remember, and so it's easy to make mistakes. And there's already a mistake on this page. If you're experienced with Visio, you probably see it right now. That mistake is that you don't just label decisions, decision 1, decision 2. A decision done properly in Visio is an actual question, such as, do you have blue eyes? And so now we have our actual question here. We're going to resize this so that the text fits a little bit nicely. And uh-oh, now look at my arrow. It's going over here and then this way and then down again. And I want my arrow to go straight. So I'm just going to select my shape and hold down the Shift button, and then I can very accurately move it from side to side. Alright, now I have my question. And of course, if I just have processes and arrows coming out from the question, then it's impossible to know just what's going on here. So, we need to make a connection from here to here. And if you double click on an arrow, you can label the arrow. So every arrow that comes out of a decision needs a label. Do you have blue eyes? Yes. What's the other option? No. And those are the only possible answers to that question. Be sure to define all possible answers. Be very thorough with your process flow charts. Alright, now we need another process for no. So we will connect to that. And you'll notice right now I'm having a little difficulty, and that's because I need to go back over to the pointer tool. Now I can move this around like I was hoping. And go back to connector tool. I'll delete these little lines that showed up. When you're new to Visio, you'll have issues like that happen quite a bit. Just remember to go back between the pointer tool and the connector tool if it starts acting weird. Okay, so now if you have blue eyes, you will blink once. That's our process. If not, blink twice. And then from our processes, go to connector tool, and we're going to end our process. So blink once, blink twice, there we go. These both go to end. And if we zoom out a little bit, we can see that the process has one start point only, and it goes from here to here. The only area where we can possibly branch out is at a question. Think of questions such as possibility branches. When you are working with charts, you're going to be working with a lot of details, and because of that, sometimes you run out of space to type details inside of a shape. You end up with a shape that's absolutely enormous. And so what you can do as an alternative is to use an annotation. So we're going to drag our annotation over here, and we will connect that to one of the anchor points on our shape. And if we double click here, then we can type lots and lots of text. And of course we can shape this any way that we want and drag it out to an area where it's not conflicting with the available space of the chart itself, but it's still connected. So that gives us a little benefit. Next, let's take a quick look at some ways that we can adjust our lines. To do that, first we'll move this box over here, and we can see that our lines are adjusting with right angle turns on them. Now if I right click on my line, I have several options available. I could choose a straight connector, which now turns my line into a straight point regardless of where I put my shape. That's not looking too good with that. There we go. We'll delete a few things so that we can focus our eyes a little bit. And zoom in. Alright, so I position anywhere. This stays a straight line. There's no right angles anymore. And of course, another thing we can do is select a curved connector, which gives me this nice shape here. And the curve can also be modified by clicking on this little anchor point there, or this point here. And so for each line there will be 3 dots if you're working with a curved connector, and you can adjust those dots however you want to get quite a few different effects. It takes a little bit of practice to get this just right and be able to accurately predict what's going to happen. If you need to navigate your chart, then you can just click in open space, which selects the chart background itself, and then just use your arrow keys. So between using your arrow keys and then holding down Control to zoom in or out, you can navigate pretty well. And then of course there might be times when you need more space because your chart's getting a little bit big, and so what you can do is hold down the Control button and then go to the edge of your chart, and then you can drag, click and drag to resize your chart. Previously, I showed you how to change the shape of a curved connector by using those little green dots that appear. And the same thing also applies to a right angle type connector. You can change the shape and dimensions by using those green dots. Being aware of that, remembering that will benefit you whenever you get a complex chart and you need to start drawing lines that go around other things due to more complex routing situations. To finish up our little introduction on Visio, I'm going to show you how to edit some of the properties of a shape. So we will just pick our start spot here, and perhaps we really want this to stand out, so we're going to go right click and then select format, and perhaps we want this to be black so that it stands out a little bit more. So we'll go black just like that. We can even play around with transparencies. Click apply, OK, and now it's black. And of course, if I want to adjust my text, then all I need to do is just select that text, and I'm good to go. As you can see, the program is pretty intuitive. I think that the greatest benefit of Visio is that it's visual, and as we all know, sometimes a picture is worth 1,000 words, and what Visio does is allows us to use our computer as the ultimate napkin and draw out different processes or charts so that other people can quickly review them. And we have the power of being visual. And sometimes Words just suck. They're not very good for communication, and it's much better to just draw somebody a picture. So there you have it. Microsoft Visio does a job, and it works very well.